All right, Dr. Jones, thanks so much for being on this podcast. I appreciate it. First off, if you could tell a little bit about yourself and how you started in the work that you do today, that'd be great.
Certainly. Thank you for having me. Well, my name is Ashley Jones. I currently live in Mississippi in the United States. I have been working in mental health for several years now. I started as a bachelor's level behavioral health technician, where I supported individuals who were involved in residential treatment programs. I continued my education with a master's degree in psychology, where I learned how to conduct research in areas related to psychology. And then I went on to complete my PhD in counseling psychology, where I learned to continue honing my therapy skills and also learned how to conduct assessments for individuals related to mental health.
So let's dive into it. So what do you do nowadays?
Yeah, so currently I'm an assistant professor at the University of Southern Mississippi. In this role, I teach courses primarily at the graduate level in our master's and doctoral programs. I also conduct research, particularly related to mental health factors and individuals who are involved in the legal system. And I also do a little bit of clinical work on the side as a contractor.
Let's talk a little bit about the classes that you teach. What do you teach?
Yeah, right now I'm teaching one course that essentially teaches training clinicians how to conduct assessments. And so, primarily educational assessments, intelligence assessments, how to use those tools related to those types of assessment processes. And then I also teach a course on personality assessment and psychodiagnostics.
Mm-hmm. So when you say like assessments, what does that sort of look like?
Yeah, so in mental health, we often talk a lot about therapy, where somebody can come in and receive treatment for a problem that they would like to get some help with, whether that's anxiety or maybe to help improve kind of their social functioning. Separate from therapy, though, we also have assessments, which is where somebody can come in and say, hey, like, I think I might have some anxiety, or I think I might have depression. Or they might say, I don't know what's going on, but I know I don't feel right. I don't feel like myself right now. And so they can meet with a psychologist and have an assessment done where they conduct a series of tests, they answer some questions, and the psychologist kind of puts that data together and helps them to kind of ascertain what might be going on for them. Maybe it is depression or anxiety. Maybe there might be some other factors at play. ADHD assessments are a common evaluation to receive. So assessments are really kind of an opportunity to gather more data than we typically would in the therapy setting, to help get a real good read on what somebody's diagnosis or functioning might be to help guide what sort of treatment they might need.
hmm and now that asked that question, so how do you sort of translate that into teaching the courses to your students? How do you sort of lay that out for students to understand, the terms and concepts? But because, obviously mental health is has some pretty broad and sort of complex concepts that it's very kind of hard for people to understand. So from a course content perspective, how do you sort of break it down in very simple, sort of tangible sort of ideas or kind of topics for them to sort of retain?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will say that the courses I teach come in students' second year. So by the time they're taking my courses, they have already had classes in things like assessment and diagnosis and therapy. So when we're working together in my course, we are really getting into the details of what these assessments include and how to conduct the actual tests. I tend to take a scaffolded approach to my courses where in the early weeks, we're talking about, like you said, these more basic building block concepts. What is an assessment? What is a test? How do those things differ? Why might somebody come in for us an assessment? And then as the semester goes on, we learn about each of those different components, how to start an assessment, what that first meeting should look like, how to administer an intelligence test, And then all the way through to how to write a report on an assessment that was completed, and then how to communicate feedback to the clients that come in about what you found as part of that assessment. So I kind of take a tiered approach of, starting with basic concepts and then building up to those more complicated ideas. And I really emphasize a lot of I guess, like live learning practices and opportunities. There's a lot of role plays, a lot of in-class practice opportunities so that folks can kind of try these skills out with me in the room. I can give them feedback. They can work together with their peers to problem solve before they then have to go out and do these as part of their actual homework assignments and as part of the test.
Now let's talk about the research. What's that all about?
Yeah, so as part of my work here at the university, I run a research lab. My lab is called the Forensic and Correctional Team. I've got students at the undergraduate level as well as graduate level. And we focus our research on a couple of small different topics. They're all kind of broadly within the subject of psychology and law, but my research tends to focus on factors related to expert testimony. So psychologists who provide testimony in court as part of ongoing legal cases. I also have some work that focuses on telehealth and how that is employed in the legal context. And then I have some work that also focuses on developing interventions for individuals who are involved in the legal system, whether they were just previously arrested or whether they are exiting prison and now reentering into the community. So I have a few different points of research, but are really just kind of projects and opportunities to help answer some questions in those areas and to help gather more data that we can improve um, the mental health interventions we have for this particular population.
Mm-hmm. And you also said that you work on like you're on something you work some on something on the side, correct?
Yeah, so I do some clinical work as a contractor, primarily forensic evaluations for the state of Mississippi.
What is that? What does that look like? Break that down for me because I'm really new to this. So.
Yeah, that's all right. So, when individuals interact with the court system, sometimes there are questions that come up. A very common question when somebody is interacting with the legal system is whether somebody has a mental health problem or mental health symptoms that might be limiting their ability to engage with the legal process. So, constitutionally, we all have a right to not be prosecuted unless we understand the charges that are being put against us, and we have the ability to participate in that legal process. And so there are times when individuals might show symptoms or might have difficulty participating in that process. So at that time, the court then raises the question of whether this individual is being constitutionally protected through the legal process. So once that question is raised, a contract evaluator or an evaluator in a particular state is then called to kind of do an assessment with that individual, meet with them, get to talk about their mental health symptoms and their legal case, and help determine whether they are able to fully participate in the legal process at that time, or if they may need a little bit of treatment to help them get better, to then be able to re-engage with the legal process after they're better.
Mm-hmm. And my next question is this: what have you learned in doing this kind of work with teaching academia, your research, and just like the work that you're doing on the side? What have you learned in doing all those things?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is that all of those things are interconnected. So I think it's really common for people to be teaching or to be doing research or to be doing clinical work, and to think it's really all kind of separate. But I think as I have engaged in these different processes all at the same time, I really have an appreciation for the way that they are all interconnected. We do research to inform our clinical practices. And when we have experience with research and clinical work, then that can give us the skills or the experiences that we need to then teach our upcoming generation of psychologists. And so I kind of see them all as like a really interconnected machine. And so it's been really nice to be able to participate at each stage.
Hmm. So when you got into forensic psychology, was there like some sort of a mentor that you sort of looked up to, or a class that you sort of took during your undergrad years or graduate years that you were like, oh, maybe I want to do this someday?
Yeah, so I completed my undergraduate degree at Arizona State University, and that's where I took my first undergraduate course in forensic psychology. It was taught by Dr. Tess Neal, who is now a really well-known forensic psychologist in the US. And that was when I got like my first real exposure to what forensic psychology could look like. And at that point, I started to kind of connect and interact with Dr. Neal as kind of like an informal mentor. And we ended up doing a little bit of research activities together, but I learned a lot from her about what the career really looks like in the real world and not just, on TV and those sorts of things. And she was a really great kind of mentor to help me understand what steps I needed to take to get to graduate school and what sort of graduate programs I would need to accomplish the work that I wanted to do. And continues to just be a great cheerleader as I'm kind of moving through my early career years.
Hmm. Do you guys still keep in touch?
We do. Yeah, I just got a Christmas card the other day. So
Yeah, that's nice. So what if, like, I know that you said that you teach graduate students in forensic psychology, but is there anything that you want to learn in terms of something new? Do you want to teach undergraduate students that, or what's sort of your next steps?
yeah, so I think a lot of my teaching right now focuses on general clinical work, which has been really rewarding to be able to kind of teach those foundational skills. I would love the opportunity to teach a more focused class on forensic psychology or correctional psychology. I think as I spend more time in this position at the university, I'm learning that I have a really big passion for training experiences, but not necessarily only in teaching, but also in kind of like extra experiences that students might participate in that help kind of shape their overall identity. So, one kind of next step or project that I'm looking at in the next year is to develop some additional training components, experiences like being able to tour a jail or a prison, or being able to shadow forensic psychologists in their day-to-day work that more students can participate in. That way they have a bigger appreciation for working with individuals who are legally involved. It's very common for clinical staff, so therapists or even psychologists, to have a negative view of individuals who are involved in the legal system because of the stigma associated with that status. And so I think one thing in the next year that I'd like to do is kind of develop some training interventions that reduce that stigma that future psychologists hold to help kind of boost the number of people going into those sorts of fields and serving individuals who are legally involved, because we know we have a big need for clinicians in that area.
Hmm. Since that's your biggest goal, like going into like prisons and all that stuff, what sort of headspace do you have to be in to sort of really be prepared to tackle on this population? Because people in prisons, it's a very kind of really difficult I'd say population to work with. So how do you sort of get in the headspace and say, hey, I'm ready to do this, I can tackle this?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing that helps is a lot of my therapeutic approach comes from the work of Carl Rogers, who was kind of the like the father of humanistic psychology, and that sort of approach to therapy, and also I think kind of an approach to people, is the idea that regardless of our life circumstances, regardless of the experiences that we've had, whether we've gotten into legal trouble or had a rough home life growing up, or maybe we struggled with substance use at some point, no matter what the factors are, we're all people first, and we are all deserving of dignity and respect and Like we should lead with that first before kind of jumping to maybe like the negative thoughts or the difficulties that people might have. And so I find that keeping that mindset at the forefront of my mind really helps me to be successful in my work with individuals who are legally involved. Because then I can go into these spaces like jail or prison, times that might be difficult to work with folks, and some people have a difficult time. But I can sit across from somebody who's had a very different life than I have had, and to be able to find some way to connect with them and to show them respect. And I find that that goes a really long way for building some common ground, to be able to do an assessment or conduct therapy, or be able to do research. So,
Hmm. Lastly, what tips of advice would you give to those who want to do what you're doing, forensic psychology and like do the research, whether it's do academia or go even to prisons to work with certain populations. What tips of advice would you give to those who want to do what you're doing?
yeah, so I think my first piece of advice is that jails and prisons or individuals who are re-entering the population, we need workers in that space. So like there is definitely an area of need in terms of finding individuals who are interested in those sorts of careers. So there's a high need, and two, that those careers can be pursued at a variety of levels of education. So I think sometimes people get in their head that they need to have a doctoral degree in order to help people or in order to work in mental health. And there are certainly career paths that include that. But the reality is that there are also positions that can be in a helping role at the bachelor's and the master's level. You may not necessarily be a psychologist or a therapist, but we need folks who are willing to do the work at every level. And so I think if somebody's interested in working with these populations or in helping individuals reenter society post legal involvement, there are lots of opportunities. And so I would say, some folks might be interested in going to graduate school, but there might be some opportunities at lower levels that help them to meet those goals sooner. So I think the overall message is like, if you're interested and you want to get involved, don't wait, right? Start exploring ways that you can use your current education and experience to help contribute early.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Okie